Hey, okay, so I actually had no intention of doing this video, but okay. So here's the story. About a couple weeks ago, I can't believe it's been 2 weeks of this. So over on Instagram, um, this is one of those things where you click on something and then it's nonstop. You see things related to it. I don't mind seeing things about dogs and puppies and that sort of thing. So, but this particular account showed an image. It showed a dog from like the 1870s, I believe, is what it said the date was. And it showed a dog on a bench with a pipe in its mouth. A cute little picture. But there were people in the comment section that said, I hate to tell you this, but the dog is stuffed. There were several people in the comment section saying this. And I, me being me, I finally commented and I said that the dog isn't stuffed. There's like an assistant next to the camera and everything. And this turned into people are still commenting. Now, this is an instance where people latch on to, they're told something and they latch on to it and they will not let it go. And I've had it. I've absolutely had it. 2 weeks of this. I even said at one point that I was a photo major. I'm the weird person who latched onto the history side because I took history classes in college. People still won't let it go. They will not accept it. Okay. It's like I don't know what has detached in your brain that you're going to take the myth over the fact. Okay, this is ridiculous at this point. All right. There are these myths, and it's not just in photography, which is my profession. Okay, it's like there are these myths that circulate all over the place, and you latch onto it, and it's like that is the fact. And you fight with people nonstop and you will not let it go. They give you the facts and you're like, nah, man, that's not, I don't believe you. They could give you like an encyclopedia, those those stacks of encyclopedias from like the 80s, they will give you that, and you're still not satisfied. What the hell? This is what I'm dealing with right now, people. 2 weeks of this because people are insistent concerning they're trying to convince me that this dog from the 1870s was stuffed. I even made the statement that people in this thread are more obsessed with death than the Victorians. Oh my gosh. I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm passionate about the history side of it. I'm passionate about photography. Okay. And to have people who are just running their mouth, they're not giving any kind of fact to back up the fact that they are obsessed with the myth. We're going to talk. Okay, 2 weeks. 2 weeks of this nonsense. I come on Instagram to post something having to do with work, and people are still at it. They're still fighting over this. This is ridiculous, people. Okay, now I also want to say this. Okay, because there are people in this thread that are talking about how they work at a museum and this is their passion and everything. That's great that it's your passion, that photography and history is your, and the history of photography is your passion and everything. But working at a museum doesn't mean anything. the fact that you got a job maybe 2 weeks ago at a museum doesn't make you an expert on anything. You touching the artifacts doesn't give you superpowers. I have heard this for so many years where people say that they have this special job. I don't care. Okay. When I worked at a department store, so when I worked in the clothing department, I'm suddenly a fashion designer. See how stupid you sound? Now, again, it's great that you are passionate about the history side and and the photography side. That's great. But don't go talking about how you work at a certain place. Nobody cares. Okay. I make fun of the fact that I went to art school because I'm going to tell you right now, just because I'm a photo major and have that degree, I am not at the same level as Annie Leibovitz. And I know that. Okay. Let's just get that out of the way. All right. Feel my frustration right now. And I really don't care if people are mad at me. This has been going on for 2 weeks. Okay. I didn't think that the floodgates would still be open on this. All right. Now, the first thing is that people are talking about the myth about exposure, that in the Victorian era, the exposure lasted for hours on end. That's not true. Okay. So we're going to talk about exposure, camera exposure in the Victorian era. Okay. Okay. I want to touch a little bit on camera obscura. Okay. Camera obscura dates back to ancient times. In fact, it literally translates to dark chamber. All right. You have a dark room with a small hole or lens, and the image is projected onto a wall, which is also known as a pinhole camera. I made one in college. Okay. Now, this was also a way for artists to trace whatever they wanted. Like say, for instance, there was a scene outside. So they would use a camera obscura and trace the outside. It would be upside down on the parchment. They would trace it and then go back and paint it, you know, in whatever way. Now, it was also used, a camera obscura was also used to see or study an eclipse without damaging the eyes. Now, I will put more information on the camera obscura because I really don't want to delve too far into it. That will be a rabbit hole that would take a long time. So, fast forward to a gentleman named Joseph Nips. He's French. He was a French inventor, and he was one of the earliest pioneers into photography that really uh, helped this invention take off. Okay. He also invented the oldest photography processing, which is it was he made a print made. I'm getting ahead of myself. It was called heliography or heliography. It was the oldest photo processing. It was a print made from photo engraved printing plate. This was in 1825. Okay. And this actually paved the way for lithograph, which lithographs were very popular during the 1800s. And, but, the thing is that, and I'll have this in the description box, all this information, because a lot of the chemical was making my brain die. Especially since uh, with all the names that I am talking about, they would intermix what chemicals they use. So please be aware of that. Um, and especially Louis Daguerre would change a lot once we get to him. Now, he, Joseph, I'm not going to keep saying his last name because I know I'm butchering it, so I apologize. But Joseph, uh, he realized that with the heliography, one of the things that he was using was making the paper turn black. It was just something was going wrong with the chemical balance. And so he just, it was, so what he did was he used a camera and captured the oldest known photograph. And this was in 1826, and it's called View from the Window. Um, in fact, oh, what's the full name of it? Let me see. Uh, View from the Window at Le Gras. I think that's how you say it. And the exposure time was 8 hours. And if you look at it, I should have it right here. You can tell the time lapse because of the shadow effect on it. You can tell the different shadowing from one side over to the other side. So there was a time lapse as the exposure was going. So, so yeah, this was the first captured photograph. However, the exposure was hours. And that was in 1826. Okay. And Joseph kept going though. He knew that that the exposure time could be quicker. So he partnered up with Louis Daguerre. Louis Daguerre was, of course, working as well. He was being a little chemist over on his side of the and and they partnered in 1929. Now, they came up with what's called Physeotype, Physeototype. Yeah, words, can't say them. Um, Let me see. I thought I had the tab up and it looks like I don't. Okay. Together, yeah, Physeototype. I know I'm saying it wrong. Okay. Okay, so in 1932, which images were produced by the use of lavender oil residue dissolved in alcohol as the photographic agent. The solution was coated onto a silver or glass plate and allowed to dry, with, after which it had a powdery white appearance. Um, the plate was then exposed in a camera obscura for about 8 hours and developed with petroleum-based spirit vapors. And so um, that's that type, and that's what they came up with. Now, Joseph died in 1933. One thing to understand is that these two men, before Louis Daguerre even paired up partnered, I should say, partnered with Joseph, he was looking at light sensitive chemicals. Um, There was obviously something going on with the light sensitivity with these chemicals to cause them to turn everything black. There's got to be another way. And that's the thing that you have to understand about this. Once people caught the photography bug, they became chemists and they really started looking at different ways, what could capture these pictures, what would work, okay, to permanently grab these pictures. I mean, sure, we've got painting and we could do that, have people sit for hours on it, that kind of thing or whatever. But no, let's do this instead. If we can get it with the snap of fingers, that would be even better, right? Uh-huh. And so Louis Daguerre was really searching for that, with these light sensitivity chemicals and everything, what would work, what would work, what would work. So he um he figured out that silver salts would work in his favor when it came to with everything else that worked to make a daguerreotype. Okay, the exposure was still long when he first introduced the daguerreotype. In fact, he had the view of Boulevard de Temple. That was in 1838. And the thing is that it was a busy street, but it doesn't look like it in the picture. You see one person, and that's because he's standing still getting his shoe shined. That's the reason why. Now, this was about the exposure time was like 3 to 5 minutes long. And so, how to make it quicker? How do we make this quicker? Well, there was another gentleman. Enter Henry Fox Talbot. Now, Henry Fox Talbot was English. Um, he was the inventor of the calotype. Okay. Now, unlike the other two gentlemen who were using like silver and copper and silver salts and all that stuff, um, he 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 used paper. He used paper printing. Uh, yeah, he was different. He was different in that sense. And now he did come up with the oldest surviving camera negative. The first one is, of course, a latticed window. And his process brought exposure time down to a minute, as long as the subjects were in bright light. And this is in 1841. Now, you consider that in the 1820s, um, when Joseph first started, that was 8 hours with uh, the rooftop picture or the window picture. That was 8 hours. Okay, and then in 38, you had the 3 to 5 minutes. Now he's got a minute. Now, photographers were starting to their studios had that window above. They had those windows. Okay. They used a lot of natural lighting. They didn't have, this was before electricity. Electricity didn't exist yet. Okay. So a lot of pictures were outside. So yeah, you see a lot of pictures outside. You also see when they are in studio. Yeah, it's photographed underneath that window. So now his process was used for science um because it was because of what it was. And And he also, I was also reading where his was he started looking at like glass plating and that sort of thing. I think the glass plating was for the science and everything, which I want to talk about Anna Atkins. I'm a big fan of Anna Atkins. Ever since we talked about her in college, Anna Atkins was a botanist. She was the first to publish a book with photographic images, and her father was friends with Henry Fox Talbot. Uh, now it this is under debate. Uh, Many want to. There are a lot who believe that she was the first woman photographer. Others want to say that it was, I believe, Henry's sister, I think, like a relative of Henry Talbot's. But it's up for debate which one it was. So I'm not going to say either way. I'm not going to confirm as to, but she came up with the cyanotype, which is still in use today, especially when printing blueprints. That's what it's best known for. She used it to show off the botany and beautiful shots, absolutely beautiful shots. And um, so this is the thing to understand about exposure, okay, is that the time of exposure depended on the process, okay? Because not only did you have daguerreotype, ambrotype, tintype, the glass plates, and cabinet cards, and cyanotype, calotype, you know, the list goes on. It did. It depended on the exposure depended on the process. And everybody had their own process. Okay, there are people that I haven't even brought up, and they had their own process. There are well-known processes. Look, I took processing in school. There was, oh man, the one that we had to do. I I had to use a large format camera, the one that looks like an accordion. And oh, it looks cool and everything, but it's a pain in the ass to use. It's it's not as enjoyable as you may think. And then to have to process those pictures is even worse. And but there was one process that I remember having to do with one of my classmates, and you had to stand in a room, not like a dark room where you have like the red light and everything. No, this is complete dark room, and you actually have to count out how long it is because you have to keep it in the solution for a certain amount of time. And if it's too soon or too late, the pictures are ruined. Like, great. It's fantastic. Yeah, so here we are. We're huddled in this room that is absolutely dark, and it had to be completely dark. So, like the little line of light at the bottom of the door, you had to cover that up as well. So it's like we are in complete darkness having to deal with this. We had to move around. Yeah, it's awful. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. So yeah, the process depends on, as I said, the time of exposure depends on the process. Okay. Now, another thing that people will bring up is, well, that's why they have the pain look on their face is because of the long exposure. Okay, I got news for you. There's, we'll get further into this later in the video, but there's those clamp chairs and clamp stands. Okay, where those things were secured on the people, that would be painful. I'm going to put a picture here. Those things look like torture devices. You're kidding me, right? Okay, they would secure at the hip or up here, like way up here, and like for a woman right underneath the bust line and right at the neck. Now you think about this. Okay. Um, you can't move. You've been secured into these devices, and then the photographer and their assistant is running around trying to perfect everything for the picture. Maybe they have to get the background. Yeah, maybe they got the wrong background. Oh, wait, we got to get the right background. Or they have to do something, somebody came into the shop and they have to take care of that person and everything. So you're sitting there and your body is starting to tweak with pain because you're in this clamp chair or the clamp stand. That is the reason. Okay. Oh my gosh. They do. They look like torture devices. It- Oh man. I mean, when you see people in these chairs, when they're showing them off and everything, for what reason or another, all I can think about is like the Vulcan neck pitch. You're trying to tell me that it's the long exposure time? No, absolutely not. Oh, there was somebody that said, well, you know, nobody smiled in there because of the, the nobody smiled. I'm going to show a bunch of pictures here of Victorians smiling. Are you going to tell me that that they held that for 30 minutes to an hour? I don't think so. Now, there were cases in the early days of people standing out in the sun and, because of having to keep their eyes open for so long, that there were, it hurt their eyes. And of course, injuries because of the clamp chairs and everything and all that. Of course, I think that it was just because them looking like torture devices. But to tell me that the nobody smiled in the Victorian era in the pictures and all that, that's show me the proof. I also have a picture of acrobats. Okay. They held that for 2 hours, for hours on end, waiting for the exposure time. Your argument is crumbling fast on this one. Okay. Don't tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. There is no way that these acrobats went in and they sat on each other for 2 hours. That would cripple them. There are pictures of contortionists from back then. You really think that somebody is going to bend themselves over and wait for 45 minutes? Even a contortion. No. Oh, geez. I also heard the argument, well, the chemicals were too dangerous, so only professionals owned cameras. Okay, this was during the Industrial Revolution. Cameras were progressing fast. Okay, and by the mid 1800s, the chemist set was discarded. Okay, Kodak was having a field day. Was having an absolute field day. Now they did have the ad going where it said, push the button and we'll do the rest. So they had these box cameras where it had like a set of, I think, I don't know how many they had and because I think it depended on what size the box camera was. And when you had finished, so say it had like 15, um, where you push the button 15 times. Well, then you send that in and they will develop the develop the pictures for you and send them back. And so they had that for you. And there were panorama cameras. Those panoramic pictures weren't pieced together. There were panoramic. I've seen them. I wanted to buy one so bad. I saw one in the collection shop here in town. I was like, oh my gosh, I want that so bad. I would love to have it just sitting with my collection. Okay. Eh, By the 1890s, there were cameras hidden in canes. There's a series of somebody who had a camera hidden in, I believe, their vest. And I believe it's in either in Sweden or Norway. And they walked around, they took pictures of the people. It's like of everyday people. You see people smiling there. Just going around showing everyday people. So they were hiding, and you can thank the Sherlock craze for that. Okay. Yes, there's pictures. There were cameras hidden in everyday objects. Okay. The laboratory was gone. The chemist's laboratory was gone, and everyday people could have cameras, and they still had the cameras like the ones that had like the flash pot, and all this, and you know, like I think of at the end of Lady and the Tramp where where they take the picture at the end and he put a little too much of the the smoke stuff. Yeah. And but I mean another gentleman to look at would be Wilson Bentley. Now Wilson Bentley is known as the snowflake photographer. And he he's he was known as saying that while everybody else hated winter where he lived, he absolutely loved it. He loved snow, and he actually wanted to prove that no two snowflakes were alike. So he set everything up, I believe, in his barn, and I have it up here. That's not the one. Um, let's see. Yeah, Bentley describes snowflakes as tiny miracles of beauty and snow crystals as ice flowers. Um, he worked with a university in Vermont, and let's see, what does it say? He said, the farm folks in this country dread the winter, but I was surprisingly happy. That's what he said. Tried to draw what he saw through an old microscope. So he tried to draw it at first, given to him by his mother when he was 15. The snowflakes were too complex to record before they melted, so he attached a bellows camera, which is large format, to a compound microscope and after much experimentation, photographed his first snowflake in 1885. Captured more than 5,000 images of crystals in his lifetime. Each crystal was caught on a blackboard and transferred rapidly to a microscope slide. Now, if you're trying to tell me that there's slow exposure, I'm not going to believe that. How is he able to capture these images? How do we have these images? But I'll show some of his work here. There's no way. So obviously uh, it's quick exposure for him to be able to do that. Uh, I'm so, so this is a myth that is debunked. It took hours. Yeah, it did when Joseph first started, But again, the Industrial Revolution was helping to progress not just cameras. There were other things as well, like the car. We'll talk about that another time. But the idea that in the 1820s there was like 8 hour exposure, and then even just in 20 years later it was less than a minute because of the calotype. The argument just isn't there because the proof is here. And I'll put it in the description box. I'm sorry, guys, but this whole thing of that the exposure in the Victorian era with cameras took hours, there is just no way. And the best proof that I have is those pictures of the acrobats. They would hurt themselves. They would be out of a job because of injuries, having to sit there for 2 to 8 hours waiting for, no, don't give me that. Saying that people didn't smile, they're smiling. So that's that's the first myth debunked. All right. Now let's talk about postmortem. All right, because I have a lot of people who in that thread talked about, well, is the dog stuffed? The dog is stuffed. I also had people saying that the Victorians posed their dead relatives. We'll get to that. And there was also this, there were like two or three people who were saying that the Victorians stuffed their relatives. We're going to talk about that too. But first, let's talk about the is the dog stuffed? Okay, we all know that the Victorians had an odd obsession with death. Is it really odd though? Because the ancients obsessed over death. It was like they were going to go to the afterlife. So is it really that odd? I mean, people obsess over death right now. You guys are obsessed with crime shows. Me included. I watch crime shows all the time. Oh gosh, I watch American Justice more than I probably should. Here's the thing. The Victorians absolutely loved their pets. Okay. They they I see a lot of pictures from daguerreotypes to cabinet cards to uh, all different types of photos of people with their pets, celebrities, eh, it doesn't matter. Children with the pets. And I see pictures of just pets, dogs, cats, birds. Birds don't like their picture taken. Those are the ones that are the most blurry. They're not having it. I think I've seen one, maybe two of a bird that is still. And, and no, it's not the Monty Python dead parrot. No, it's not. Um, there's one I restored and colorized. It's of an older lady, and she has the bird, and so she's keeping the bird calm, and you can see the feathers and everything. And there's another one she's pretty popular with colorizers. She's a teenage girl and she's showing off her canary. Unfortunately, the canary's head moved. And the canary is sitting on her hand, and yeah, so you can see the rest of the body, but the head. And as animals do. Animals are squirmy. Animals are, yes. And that's the thing, is that there are many of these photos where animals move. They're squirmy. Like dogs, their tails wag, everything. I see a lot of times where it's just you see a bunch of fuzz because animals move. It's- If the animal is still and it's a very crisp picture, that does not mean that it's stuffed. The animal is well trained. Okay, I'm not sure where the disconnect is on that. Okay, this is also during the time where there were vaudeville shows. Vaudeville shows also used dogs, cats, horses. And the other thing I was noticing when I was looking for pictures on this is that there are a lot of dogs that will be looking up or looking to the side. This is not a coincidence. Okay, for them to all look at the same place, there's obviously someone behind the camera or at a certain place in the studio that's getting the dog's attention, using something to get the dog's attention. Okay, there is no way that a taxidermist is posing these animals the same damn way. Okay, so get off your high horse and stop saying that these animals are dead in every single stupid fucking picture. Okay, that that's just ridiculous. Again, you've latched onto something and you're spreading misinformation like that. It's just ridiculous. Okay, now there is somebody who is very knowledgeable in this, very subject. I believe it's Jack Mord, um, wrote a book about it, actually showed this person collect I think I'm saying the wrong name, but I will put information in the description box. And the book is titled Under the Black Veil, and reminds me of Nathaniel Hawthorne's story. But the collection of postmortem pictures that this person has collected and everything, and just the knowledge that they have, everything, I highly recommend you check it out. And again, I will have the information in the description box because I'm pretty sure I'm saying the wrong name. So I apologize for that. But I just it yeah, they have like the funeral carts. There was one I think in Brazil that was you know it, looking at that and how detailed it was and how beautiful it was, it reminded me of the funeral ships to take Pharaoh across to the afterlife. Just all the detail and all the work that they put in for something like that, just to send somebody to their final resting place. And so yeah, I'll have the information, and they have a lot of information. Again, I'm sorry that I can't remember their name off the top of my head. I don't have a tab up. I wish I had thought of that. The other thing, and I know that they have information, this particular uh, person, there are pet cemeteries from the Victorian era in Europe. I don't know about here. I'm pretty sure we had here in America pet cemeteries. Please explain how it is that people who absolutely adore their pets, there are people who I see on Twitter all the time showing, on social media in general, not just on Twitter, where they show these old uh, gravestones for their cats, for their dogs, for their bunnies, for their what have you. And you're trying to tell me that they're gonna just stuff their dog and do a picture like that? Are you out of your mind? This is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so there's two gentlemen I want to talk about. Um, there's a photographer by the name of Harry Whittier Freeze. And Harry Whittier Freeze, his photography actually went under controversy at the time that he released it. His is of the cats and dogs, and I believe bunnies, and I think those are the only ones that he used. His came out in, I believe, 1910, and he preferred working with cats. Now, he was a loner, he adored animals, and he just thought this was something fun, showing cats and dogs in little outfits, showing them like at a birthday party, doing laundry, doing everyday things. And his inspiration for it was he and his family had a birthday party and they were passing the birthday hat around, put it on the cat, and at first the cat didn't like it, but then all of a sudden stopped and was like, well, this isn't so bad. So that's where his inspiration was. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people, such as with this, where they were like, you killed the animal and then you're posing it. And he finally spoke out and said, I would never do that to an animal. I would never do that. So he explained, he did an interview and he talked about, working with these animals. And he said that he worked 3 months out of the year because it was so stressful working with these kittens and puppies and everything. So he was very patient with them, but at the same time. There was at one point I read where he would work with them in a barn and he had to make sure that there wasn't any distractions. So like if there was a fly in there, he wasn't going to get any work done because the cats were, especially with the kittens. The kittens just weren't gonna, yeah, they were done. As soon as that fly, it was like anything, nothing was gonna get done that day. And so that's Harry, Whittier Freeze. The idea that, I mean, he was just so frustrated over the fact that people thought that he would hurt these animals. And now another one is Harry Pointer. Now he's from the UK. Now I'm not as familiar with his work. I'll have information about him in the description box. And he's actually earlier, his work is actually earlier than Harry Whittier Freeze. And he just showed these cats. He only did cats. I didn't see where he did anything else, but that doesn't mean anything. He maybe did puppies but he just did fun little poses with these animals. They were his cats. And then he would write little, scribble little things on the pictures, such as there's one of a cat next to a photograph and it says the photographer, and another one where they're in like a tea box, with a teacups and a teapot and it says tea time, that kind of thing. So fun little things like that. These cats aren't dead. These ca- so again, debunked. Okay, these are the LOL cats of the Victorian era. Just stop. Yes, the Victorians had a weird obsession with death. I have seen the postcards. They're illustrated. It shows frogs killing bugs. Weird. I don't get it. They were Christmas cards. I don't, weird. And I've also seen where it has these kids looking at dead canaries. I don't understand that. I don't get it. So yeah, I totally, I don't understand. I don't understand it. But to just decide that these cats and dogs are no. The animals are moving. I have seen enough pictures where these animals are moving. They're obvious. The blurriness shows that they're moving. Okay. And I have also seen pictures where The dog looks like they're sleeping, the animal looks like they're sleeping, and it says, "This is our beloved Milo. He died today." That's the most famous one is, "This is our beloved Milo. He died today." Okay. And when there are pet cemeteries, really, they're gonna they're gonna stuff them. Oh my gosh. I don't know where that started. And for them to say it and then not show evidence of it. I have yet to see evidence of that ever happening. I looked through in the past week, I looked to try and find stuffed animals. Okay. In studios, they had wooden animals. You could tell, they had like these backdrops of like safari and they had a wooden elephant for the kids to sit on. And you're going to tell me that they had stuffed dogs in there? Right. They didn't bring a stuffed big old lion or something for the safari thing. They'll bring a stuffed dog. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Makes total sense. Whatever. So that's another thing to bug. Okay, they loved their animals. All right. Probably about as much as people do now. Okay, now the postmortem with people. Here we go. This is one of the reasons why I really didn't want to talk about this, but because 2 weeks of nonstop. It's just okay. So yes, there was posing with dead relatives. This is basically for the Victorians, because it's weird to us now. It is weird and creepy. I'm totally behind that. I agree with that 100%. But to the Victorians, it was like that one last picture that you were going to get with your family member. Um, the still weird though. But we didn't live back then. It's just one of those things. The using the clamp chairs and the clamp stands to pose, your dead relatives. I think the creepiest that I have ever seen, I mean, like I've seen where you have your children lined up and the dead child is at the very end. Yeah, you wouldn't put a sleeping child at the very end. Um, but I've also seen where they put, like grandpa died and they put their newborn child next to dead grandpa. And it's like, again, Victorian mindset where, well, grandpa never met this baby, so here's a picture with them together. And it's like, still weird though. Oh, gosh. Wait till that kid turns into a teenager and isn't traumatized, right? But I guess if it was normal back then. Now, here's the thing about those clamp chairs and clamp stands. That does not mean that every time you see a clamp stand, that the person is dead. Do I have to beat it into you? I can't tell you how many people I've come across where it's like, well, because there's a clamp stand behind them, that means, okay, look at 10 types of baseball players. Does that mean that the baseball player is dead? Yeah, there you go. Because that baseball player doesn't look dead. He looks fine to me. Oh my gosh. Start looking at these pictures and start to actually realize, Lord. Um, I don't know how else to get people to understand that one. Okay, yeah, the clamp stands were used to pose dead relatives, but it doesn't always mean death. Okay, it really doesn't. Uh, One of the other things was when it comes to postmortem children, especially babies, you see like a blanket over someone's head, like a cloth over someone, and the thing is that that's not always used on dead children. I mean, one example I have here, the child looks concerned. He's not dead. He looks very concerned. These are more humorous than anything. Look, children are wiggly. And there are children who, especially like infant children who they want mom. There are some that are friendly, they'll laugh, they'll giggle at anything, but there are some that they just want mama. So, as a way to help with that and to get this picture of this 1-year-old child, um, or not even a year old, you know, you put the cloth over the head and hold the baby. We have a picture. I was talking to mom about this earlier, and she says that there's a picture of my grandmother, and her mother is holding her hand. Now, there are plenty of pictures of that as well, where the baby may have been fussy, and it could be the assistant, it could be a nanny, it could be the mom, what have you. And they reach over and they touch the child as comfort. It's not postmortem. Okay. Just calming the child down so we can get the picture. Okay. That's all it is. And yes, there are, like the cloth over the head is sometimes used for postmortem so that you can get that last shot of your loved one, and unfortunately there were a lot of infant deaths during that time, and you want to get that last picture. But it was also used to to keep to be, to keep baby quiet. That and the holding the baby, holding the baby's arm or whatever, does not mean that they're dead. Okay. And as for stuffing the relatives, I don't know where that comes up. I did not see any proof of that. Okay. Where did that come up? I saw a lot of pictures of people gathered around the loved one in the coffin, which I'm guessing that was right before the funeral service or before burial. But as for stuffing, where did that come up? Now, the closest thing that I can gather is that, okay, this is in Europe, there were known in the Victorian era as mummy unwrapping parties, and unfortunately, that's not a myth. It really did happen. Okay, and I'll have information of that in the description box. Uh, there was like this spurt of interest in ancient Egypt. And so there were a lot of these rich people who were going down to Egypt. They would purchase these mummies and then come up and have these unwrapping parties. And yeah, so that was going on in Europe. Now, before uh, my Europe viewers get mad, here in the US, it was just as bad. Okay. I came across where, of course, we have John Wilkes Booth, who murdered um, President Lincoln. Okay, and there's this whole myth surrounding when he actually died and everything, it's all that. Well, it turns out that his brother, Edwin Booth, uh, took control of the body and never told anybody where it was. Okay, so there's that. Well, somebody who had helped John Wilkes Booth died, and the funeral home didn't really, I mean, they didn't give the body to the family, or the family didn't pick it up, or what have you. So it was on display in the funeral home and given a different name. And then somehow that body was given to a sideshow, and it was given the name John Wilkes Booth. So it was said to be the mummy of John Wilkes Booth. This is not the only time that it happened. There were a lot of mummies in sideshows, be it Egyptian mummies or mummies of whatever, cursed mummies, this mummy, that mummy, whatever. And in fact, there was one that was dug up in the desert. Nobody knew who this person was. It could have been like, it had two bullet wounds in the chest. Now, naturally mummified because, being in the desert and everything. And so the sideshow decided to just make up a story about this person. Yeah, so again, America wasn't any better. And of course, you had uh, people going and digging up fresh graves. I mean, Robert Louis Stevenson, the body snatchers, pretty much exposed all that. So when you see skeletons in Victorian medical pictures, those are real skeletons. The bodies were freshly dug. Those are actual bodies. They they did not say that they could have their bodies. They did not donate their body to science. That's what I'm trying to say. No. A lot of times what happened was that a doctor would recruit their students to keep their hands clean and then have their students go and dig up graves in the cemetery, fresh graves. And in fact, Robert Louis Stevenson's story, Body Snatcher, actually exposed a famous doctor. That doctor ended up in prison. So, yeah. Um, but as for stuffing relatives, I've never heard of that. I never, never heard of that. And the people that were claiming that didn't back it up with any. And even when I was doing research for this, I didn't see anything about that. I looked, couldn't find anything. So, um, because I have no problem with being proven wrong, but I didn't see anything about that, about people stuffing their relatives. And there were like four or five people that were saying, "Oh yeah, you know that it happened." Well, if it happened, then I would have found something, and I didn't see anything. So, um, now the final thing that I want to touch on, I don't think people realize this. They're quick to mouth off and say that they're right about all this other stuff, but they have absolutely no clue. I look like I have a comb over with that shadow. Old Father William, the young man said. Here's the thing is, and I'll have information in the description box for you, is that the Victorians were experts in Photoshop before Photoshop ever existed. And I don't just mean the decapitation pictures, where they're holding their head and that sort of thing, which gives us a little giggle in that. And then, of course, there's also the ghost pictures and the seance pictures. If you're not familiar with the seance pictures, which, well, looking for this, I actually found dog seance pictures. The seance pictures were popular towards the late Victorian era. And of course, this is during a time when everybody was not everybody, I should say, but where people were superstitious. And of course, they held seances. So, of course, you had these pictures where you had the one person, the person who was getting their picture taken, and then it showed multiple of them. So think Michael Keaton's Multiplicity, where it had them around the table. And well, I saw one of those of the dog. I'll put it up here. And it shows a dog. Yeah, those are what's considered the seance pictures, is where you see multiple of them. Or I guess you could call it the Michael Keaton multiplicity pictures. But back then it was, you also see the pictures of the loved ones in a ghostly image behind. The most famous is, of course, the Abraham Lincoln behind Mary Todd Lincoln. And I really don't want to go on a tangent about that because that's a whole other video. Trust me, I really don't want to get into that. But so you have these types of uh photoshopping with the decapitation and the multiple of one person, and the ghosts, the ghost visits, and fun little things like that. But there is retouching. They have facial retouching, and they also have physical deformity retouching. And so say for instance somebody has physical lazy eye, they retouch it. The person wanted it fixed, they fix it. I have seen pictures where somebody has like a mass right here, and this old woman has a mass right here and it's fixed, so she looks normal. And so I mean, yeah, they they knew what they were doing. The retouching goes further back than you think. It's not just the um the ghostly images and that sort of thing. Now with the animals, you know, animals, dogs wag their tails when they're happy. You see uh, quite often where the tail is blurry because their happy little tail wags. Well, there's retouching there. I've seen quite a few retouches there. When people blink in photographs, their eyes are, there's artwork there. I mean, their eyes are photoshopped in. Scarring, physical deformities are photoshopped out. Now, with postmortem pictures, a lot of times the eyes are photoshopped in. People have requested that. I see that quite a bit. And so, but other times it's just because the person blinked. So you can't just go on the whole thing of it's always postmortem. I don't understand why people are so fixated on the fact that everything is postmortem. This always means death. No, it doesn't. No, it does not. Okay, so I will have information in the description box concerning the Victorian photoshopping because it's actually very interesting. I mean, this was during an age of um, artistry and everything, so artistry was big. And so artists were hired to fix that sort of thing. So, but anyway, um, closing. All right. It started off with 8 hours. The exposure time, 8 hours. Okay. And then within 20 years, it was down to a minute. So, and then the postmortem thing, I will have the information of, I'm pretty sure it's Jack Mord, but I will make sure that that is correct in the description box. Um, but I, it doesn't always mean death. Okay. Oh, mercy, mercy me. It's- again, it's one of those instances where you find like this bit of trivia and you can't let it go. And you're never going to let it go. And it doesn't matter what anybody says. This is just fact now. Well, I'm sorry, but people didn't stuff their relative. I don't, that's the one that really got me. They posed their relatives. They buried their relatives. This whole thing that and I had to go into the whole thing with the sideshow and using random people for the sake of entertainment, which is not a good thing in history. It happened, unfortunately, and then the unwrapping of mummies. Mummies were ground down for medicinal reasons. Again, unfortunately, that also happened in ancient times. Okay, I'm giving a little bit of a pass, not a lot, but it is what it is, unfortunately. So, I'll have that all of that info, as my dyslexia goes. I will have all of that information in the description box, and hopefully this will put all that to rest because I'm really getting tired of going on my Instagram and people are still at it. Anyway, I'll close up here.